Okay. City Council is called into session. Roll call, please. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Thank you very much. Okay. May I have a motion to open the public hearing? Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Goods. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, to our highly esteemed finance chair, Councilman Miranda, if you could please do the reading of the second public hearing statement, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the second public hearing for the City of Tampa fiscal year 2020 budget. The proposed millage rate of 6.2076 mils, which is 6.69 more than the rollback millage of 5.8181 mils. Property tax funds are used to support the general fund operating the budget of the city. This fund includes such departments as the fire rescue, police, human resources, parks and recreation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, first we're going to begin with the administration presentation and thereafter the citizen budget advisory presentation. Since I think a lot of the questions are very likely going to be running concurrent, we'll wait until both presentations are done for questions. So if the administration wishes to go forward, you may. And then after initial questions, we'll move to public comment.
All right. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
And good evening, community. My name is John Bennett, Chief of Staff, City of Tampa. Normally, I go off the cuff and from the heart, which is the way I like it, but tonight I have a few prepared comments. They will be brief. And then after that, we'll ask our Chief Financial Officer, Dennis Rojero, and our City Attorney in support, Sal Torito, to come up and give some specifics about tonight's agenda. So thank you for that. As you well know, we're gathered here tonight for the second public hearing of the 2020 fiscal year budget for the City of Tampa. But first, how about a little context before we get started? Mayor Jane Castor stood here a short 32 business days ago and presented to the community through the leadership of this City Council a balanced and responsible budget. This serves our near 400,000 citizens, as well as those beyond living, come here for work, education, and play each and every day. It was only double that time, or 64 short business days prior to that budget presentation, that all of you were sworn in on May 1st to this next chapter of Tampa's bright future. The mayor also reminded all of us that Tampa will most likely undergo more change over the next decade than it has in previous decades, which is no surprise between our vibrant and diversified communities. So what has happened relevant to the budget process and what our collective responsibility this evening as a council, an administration, and most of all, a community involves? First, we need to recognize that the budget is a plan. And while a plan must have focus and flexibility to adapt to strategic change, it also must have resiliency towards economic risk and those risk factors to protect our ultimate trust, which is our citizens. To signify this point, I marked a page during this process in one of my 10 top leadership books, which is General Colin Powell's autobiography that talks about where he denotes clarity, consistency, and commitment that make our plan about serving the people, which translates to the public and our public servants as well. Next, in concert with what I just shared, this is exactly what Mayor Castor has focused on, the people within the plan. By example, within the budget she presented on August 1st, the focused, flexible, and still resilient budget offers a collective pathway toward these strategic goals. First, neighborhood empowerment. Next, transportation. Third, affordable housing. Fourth, sustainability and resiliency. And lastly, financial stability. As well as launching 4 of the 5 advisory teams for actionable recommendations on transportation, workforce development, affordable housing, and development services under the trusted leadership of our transition leader, Carol Post, as the chair, Honorable Harry Cohen, and our former CFO, Sonia Little, as co-chairs. Lastly, within the realm of flexibility, the administration acted upon motions made by you as City Council in the first budget hearing. Tonight, our CFO will outline the requested budget amendments to the first line item of $108,000 towards the nonprofit community to support enhanced messaging toward the city's mission of increasing and improving the quality of life. By example, we expect to hear some deliverable concepts from both the TBAE as well as the Cultural Assets Commission for the intended use of some of these dollars to better serve our community. Second is motion unanimously by City Council positioning $1 million via the Community Investment Tax, or what we call CIT, will be in support of the already $400,000 that the administration positioned for a comprehensive review toward efficient, effective, and equitable, as well as inclusive parks and recreation facilities and programs. Third, albeit not necessarily a motion, but a request that the administration within the balanced budget will be funding an increased level of EMS service based out of Station 16, while the administration works with our fire rescue chief toward their strategic plan of ensuring comprehensive public safety deliverables over this and subsequent fiscal years. So as I wrap up, we are all at hard work during this compressed planning period for FY 2020. Please keep in mind that a good plan can be agile while still being effective, efficient, and equitable. As I turn the podium over to our legal department and then our CFO for some brief housekeeping and technicalities of what I mentioned, the community looks forward toward your support of the city's plan through the FY 2020 budget. Thank you. Sal?
Sal Torito, even on my name, Sal Torito Legal Department. Just want to mention to you that since all the changes that you requested have been made, there are no impediments that you continuing tonight on your second public hearing. You're free to go forward based on what has already been told to you. So that's all I already had to tell. Procedurally, you're okay to move forward on the second hearing and the second budget meeting tonight. That's all I really had to say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the administration? Oh, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Council. Dennis Rajero, Interim Chief Financial Officer. Just to expand on a couple of the things Chief of Staff said, presuming we go forward tonight with the changes that the Chief of Staff referenced, we will bring you appropriate amending budget resolutions in your first City Council meeting in October. These will include an appropriation from the Community Investment Tax for both the asset associated with expanded EMS service in Tampa, East Tampa, and an appropriation from the Community Investment Tax for a cultural center in East Tampa, as, again, we look forward to the results of the Master Plan for Parks and Recreation. I understand and remember there was talk about another source of funding in the CRA and an equal amount for that. I don't believe a motion was made at the CRA board, so that is still in play to the best of my understanding. That'll be the expanded EMS service in East Tampa, the Cultural Center in East Tampa, and then, of course, as you heard the Chief of Staff, the TBAE. Because that is an incremental payout throughout the fiscal year, we will continue to monitor the distribution of that approximate $108,000 throughout the year, and in quarterly segments, we'll find the funding. And you'll see all this in a series of budget changes, again, in your first meeting in October. Thank you.
Anyone else from administration? And we're going to wait until after the Citizens Advisory Committee goes to do any questions, so then we'll take them all at once. So, anyone else from the administration? Okay. Citizens Advisory, come forward.
May I ask that he introduce the members
Yes.
of the City Advisory are here with the chair today, and the chairman is Stephen Lytle, and whoever's here, I'd like to recognize him. And also at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to thank Verena Hardwork for doing all the hard work and the technical assistance that was needed for the City Advisory Budget Committee during the year. She is the aide to Councilman Citro.
Yes, sir. Well said.
Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you tonight. We do have a presentation, a PowerPoint here, that'll help guide you through the conversation that we're going to have tonight. And echoing what Councilman Miranda said, we do have a couple of members here, Viva as well as Craig, and it's wonderful to have their support and very thankful for them to be here. The way that this committee works is obviously each of you appoint a committee member, and then we have very robust conversations with the department directors throughout the year. This year being a little bit of an anomaly given the elections and the expedited time frame that we had to move forward with. But as you can see, we have different members who've served in different capacities. We have 4 who are brand new, and thank you both for my 2 peers for being here that are new and learning more and being very active within the committee. We also have Joe, who is appointed by Councilman Vera, and Missy Martin, who was appointed by Councilman Maniscalco, who have some tenure on the committee as well. I've had the opportunity to serve as the committee chair for 4 years, and I think this year will be my last as we allow some fresh blood to get in and see what can happen. I'll still serve on the committee, but I want to see what else the other opportunities exist. We do have support from both Mike Perry as well as Lorena, who have been absolutely tremendous assets to us throughout this process, helping us to understand the budgeting process and ask the right questions to get to the bottom of things that we need. We did visit with quite a few departments. You can see those listed above. I think there's a couple that we did miss, HR being one of them, and I believe fire, because we did have an expedited timeline. When we only had about 60 days to meet with every department, it makes it very difficult, especially when we want to make sure that our committee members are there and present and have a voice within the decision-making process. In the past, the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee has made recommendations that have been successful. And so here you'll see city fleet and apprentices in 15 fiscal year. Some of those were repeated in 16. We've seen parks and recreation maintenance up there many times. We've seen stormwater, which we saw changes to that a few years ago. We talked about the millage rate in fiscal year 18. And last year we talked a lot about the master plans, the new Tampa Health Clinic, the health clinic up in North Tampa, a parking audit which is taking place, and then human resources and personnel cost. You'll see some of these are repeated year over year because we do feel that they're priorities within the budget, but you'll also notice that in 15, the evolution of our Budget Advisory Committee was, in fiscal year 15 when I first joined, we were giving a litany of options for you guys in terms of where we wanted you to allocate money. And I kind of compare that to when you have a child, and thankfully I'm a dad of a 10-month-old and she doesn't do chores yet, but when she does, you give her chores and you give her a list of 10 or 15, and you come home 2 or 3 done, and they're probably the easiest ones. We determined that we needed to really kind of evolve our committee to not only prioritize what actually needs to be done, but also to consider where we find increased revenue as well as cost savings. And so some of these, as we've gone through the years with the parking audit, with the parks and recreation fees, with the health clinic, you'll see that some of them are a spend, but some of them are a cost savings as well. These are some of the successful recommendations we've made. The apprenticeships program happened in 16 and 17. We're very ecstatic to see the North Tampa Health Clinic on the fiscal year plan for this year. Parking rate studies underway. Obviously, you guys know about the master plans, and so that's all been a part of this. Our recommendations are broken down into allocations, revenues, and savings, and also future planning. And future planning was something that we added last year during our transitional council because we knew that there wouldn't be a whole lot that we could influence, but we wanted to make sure that we considered that year over year as well. So we knew the impact, and we were making responsible decision making as it relates to our budget. So our first recommendation this year is regards to the city employee population. And with over 4,500 employees, we have a lot of internal and external customers we have to make sure that we meet the level of service, whether it's fire or police, whether it's wastewater, whether it's solid waste, code enforcement, or even HR. And last year you saw us come up here and speak pretty significantly about HR as it relates to overtime costs, contracted services. So overtime costs, contracted services, similar to Mancon and Fleet, contractor costs, which credit goes to very timely showing up, Mr. Dingfelder, for asking questions about HR last time when we had the hearing, because he talked about the contracting costs. And I know that there was a recent RFP for contractors, and so we looked at those. And last year we thought some of those rates might be a little high for what we're paying for contractors. And so our recommendation is that we do propose a workforce planning audit to identify headcount needs by department, the overtime cost, and contract employee costs and contract services costs. The reason for this being is, in addition to what we've seen last year, many times we hear about overtime cost, and it's associated with vacancies. And when you go on the city's website and you look at metrics, we see from fire, we see them from police, we see them from solid waste, we see them from fleet, but there's no metrics for HR. And so what are those time to fill? What does it look like in terms of our ability to fill those positions and prevent overtime cost? And so we'd like to see some kind of audit there or workforce planning to make sure that we're decreasing total overall cost and creating metrics that create responsibility in that manner. Attention should be paid, obviously, with those contractors and contract costs. We don't incur the pension or the healthcare costs, so some attention should be paid to that. The next one is, I know, something that we probably can't discuss in detail here tonight because I know that the unions are currently in negotiation, but we did feel that it was prudent to bring up the fact that there's been proposals for a healthcare trust. And our job as a committee is not only to find areas where we can allocate funding for the needs of our communities and the needs of our city, but also where we can provide a cost savings. And although we can't provide those numbers up here today, I think that we believe that if there's immediate financial impact to the city, that we should check out and explore the opportunity for a health trust for Tampa Fire Rescue or Tampa Police Department. The reason for this being is if you look at the graphic below, which comes straight from the budget presentation, in 9 years, we've actually increased $20 million in our healthcare costs alone. And I know that that's reflective of what's going on nationally, but it's something that we need to keep a close eye on and identify any opportunities where there are potential cost savings. We do think that while it's a great opportunity to pursue or to at least explore, awareness should be paid to what the impact would be on the general employee population and the long-term financial implications. Furthering that, we want to talk about where we can save some money or where we can provide some money for you guys. And the city currently has a P-card program that I'm sure you guys are familiar with that allows purchases up to almost $2,000. And each year we get back about, I think the number is 3% of the numbers that are used on the P-card. And we look at that and we see those small dollar purchases equate to about $300,000 a year. And so our recommendation is that the city expand the current P-card program to include larger purchase limits and potentially the ability to pay for capital improvement project costs using the P-card. When we sat down with the purchasing department, I think initially we heard, oh, well, we could go from $300,000 to nearly $1 million. But I think right now that they currently are in a pilot since we met with them, and the increased rebates was more realistically around $600,000. Some of these things may be small numbers, $300,000 there or $100,000 there. But when you think about the impact that one neighborhood could have if you had $300,000 to them or $100,000 to another neighborhood, it's pretty significant. And so every drop in the bucket is important for us. I want to talk a little bit about future planning and making sure that we're reflecting responsible decision-making within the budget. And while all of our committee members agree that, at least to my knowledge, we are unanimous in the fact that we believe that police body cameras are a great opportunity for us to assure accountability with citizen interaction with law enforcement, we have to be cognizant of the long-term commitment and future funding sources for body cams. When we look at the budget, there's $1 million donation this year, which is going to help out a little bit to alleviate the cost. But the initially anticipated cost for officer for the hardware is about $540,000. The additional headcount needed for body camera analyst alone is $245,000. And then you have $1.3 million in annual costs for data storage. One of our committee members recommended whether there's an opportunity to have that data storage with the city versus paying $1 million annual cost for that. Also considering how is that RFP written? Is it written specifically for that company? You know, we've seen RFPs like the 30-foot Christmas tree where it has to have 1,412 lights. Well, there's probably one company that has that Christmas tree with 1,412 lights. So we have to be cognizant of how we write that RFP and making sure that we give opportunities and see who is eligible to do that, whether it's working with vendors or working with working directly with the warehouse who stores those. The other thing about future planning is we all know that the city of Tampa is growing and downtown is growing in an exponential rate. 1.5 million by 2021 in terms of the square footage that'll be completed for Water Street, 32% growth in downtown residential units in the last 2 years, 18 new buildings, 4,000 residential units. That's just amazing numbers, and it shows what we've done with our city. And that growth is also happening across the city. Our focus right here is really about the impact on Tampa Fire Rescue, given the amount of square footage that's going to be added to downtown. But as we've heard in previous presentations with Councilman Goods, it seems there are needs for the other parts of the city, whether it's East Tampa or whether it's Busch Gardens. And so we want to make sure that future planning allows the city to maintain a superior level of service.
Let me interrupt you, if I may. Yep. About how much longer do you think you have? Reasonably.
Minute and a half.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
So I want to make sure that the future planning allows for a superior level of service to response time for Tampa Fire Rescue while mitigating the needs associated with the commercial and residential growth, not just downtown, but everywhere, while the focus is primarily on downtown now. Finally, this is something that's probably we've noticed, and I think Councilman Maniscalco, Miranda, and Vieira are probably familiar with this, and Councilman Dingfelder in his past experiences with budget. But we've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, oftentimes we come here and we have conversations about the budget. and we'll ask about changes to the budget. We'll ask about changes to the millage rate. And a lot of times the conversation that comes up is, what if we don't approve this? And many times the pushback is, well, we're mandated by the state to approve it by October 1st, and that is by state statute. But it doesn't mandate how early you can begin those conversations. And oftentimes, just like we saw 2 weeks ago when we want to make changes to the budget, we're relying on a resolution because the budget was presented to you guys 32 days ago. And then you have to make you have to give the announcements that we're having the budget hearings. You have to do it again. You can't make significant changes based on feedback. And so our suggestion is that we move the budget process ahead or back 2 to 4 weeks to allow for more robust conversation and changes as necessary. And I think that would probably alleviate some of the concerns that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years specifically. That's all I have for you guys today in terms of what we're doing from a budget planning process or the Budget Advisory Committee. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you guys that are new to council this year for finding us new members to serve on the Budget Advisory Committee. I found that all of the ones that have been appointed to the committee have been very value added and have served wonderfully. I look forward next year to bringing our presentation in a little bit earlier with less than 60 days or probably 45 days when we thought about when you guys were announced into office. It gave us really an expedited time frame, so it was a little bit more difficult this year, but I do appreciate the continued opportunity and look forward to serving you guys in the future.
Thank you very much, sir. And I know Councilman Goods and Councilman Carlson, I know wanted to speak, so now is the time to inquire and ask questions.
I like for his committee to come up so people can see who was on this robust committee to make some of these fabulous recommendations to council if they would come up to be recognized. Stand to be recognized. I see Mr. Newman. I see Joe Johnson in the back. Anybody else here, Mr. Lytle, on that committee? Make sure we recognize these fine folks for the work they've done. Well, I just want to say thank you for the work you've done. I know Mr. Newman, I know Mr. Johnson, and I know they worked hard to put some things in this packet that we probably can utilize and look forward to probably implementing, because I know when we talked about procurement and talked about the level of savings and some of these contracts have been in flux 40%, and we think that we need to look at some of those things. So I just want to thank you for your service.
And if I may, Councilman, before, I wanted to ask each member just to come up and introduce yourself, and that's it. Viva, you may begin.
Good evening. I'm Viva Chavez, appointed by Councilman Dingfelder.
I'm Craig Newman. I was appointed by Bill Carlson.
Joseph Johnson. I was appointed by Councilman Goods.
Thank you, sir, and thank you guys all for your service on here. I can tell you, this being I guess it is my third budget round as a city council member, I always not just look forward to y'all's presentation, but I pay it a lot of deference. I really do. I mean, in my first year on council, we were looking at raising the millage rate, and you guys came out strongly for that adjustment. Y'all just won a lot of credibility with me, and that continues to this day, so I mean that. So Councilman Goods, Councilman Carlson, then Councilman Dingfelder. Sir, did you have anything? Or?
I'm finished.
Oh, sure. Okay, Councilman Carlson and Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you also to all of you who served and the folks that couldn't make it tonight. The last recommendation that Mr. Lytle made about changing the schedule, I think that's really important. We talked about it a couple times. And maybe Mr. Bennett, Chief Bennett, maybe we can work on a schedule. I know we're busy doing a million other things, but we talked about starting it in April, actually. And so maybe we don't have to do it now, but maybe we could look at that schedule and starting early on. We talked about, instead of each of us individually going, we could just have a forum where we philosophically discuss the budget maybe in April.
Yeah, I mean, planning makes great sense for all of us. So I think I'm used to a longer planning cycle with the budget responsibility, so I'll talk to the administration.
And this one has been disrupted a little bit because we're here at the end, and we, as someone stated, we're all trying to cram a lot of time.
Well, and we had the hurricane threat the day before
too.
our first budget hearing.
I want to ask you a clarifying question. You mentioned, if I heard you right, you mentioned $108,000 for TBAE, and then you said also the Cultural Assets Commission. Do you mean
that's the same? That's the same $108,000.
It's the same, and it's all for TBAE, or is it for the Cultural?
All for TBAE.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Dingfelder.
Yes. Well, thank you to the committee and its chair. Very good job, very comprehensive. I have to say I'm a little jealous. I was talking to Ms. Javed, and she was telling me about the amount of time that each department came and chatted with the committee, and specifically about the budget. And I think that would be helpful for this council next year as part of our process and new process, Mr. Bennett. Maybe one or two departments could come in the months leading up and say, this is what we need, this is what we're doing, this is why we're so efficient, et cetera. But I think, and Mr. Lytle, as much as it might pain me, I think I agree with many of your recommendations. Thank you for your hard work.
Anything else, sir? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. And yes, I agree 110%. Again, thank everybody for their service, et cetera, on this committee. Okay, so if I may, I'm going to ask for opening of public comment for operating and capital budget. Yes, sir.
May I understand, was it time for us to also ask the administration question?
Oh, yes, of course, you may. Yeah.
Mr. Bennett and the Chief of Staff and the Financial Officer.
I'm sorry.
Chief of Staff and Mr. Harrell, just some clarification points. I want to make sure I'm clear. We have a lot of a packed house here today, and a lot of people don't know certain words and jargon, so I want to make sure we're clear because I keep hearing like doubts. And I want to make it clear that you mentioned the CRA. The CRA came to us. Those minutes were already sent to the appropriate people that said it would match what we needed to do as far as the Cultural Enrichment Center in East Tampa. There are also other funding sources that people have been calling in reference to that. So I don't want any doubt where people think we have doubt here. This is a project. You see the audience. They're here to express their concerns. So I want to make sure we talk about that particular $1 million. Let's talk again, where is it coming from? Where is it going to be held at? So when it's time to move, we're ready to move.
Yes, again, our preferred method would be at your first council meeting in October. We'll bring you a resolution requesting appropriation from the community investment tax for $1 million.
All right. Thank you for that on item
Yes, sir.
one. Item two, clarity about the ask in reference to the rescue car for East Tampa full-time.
Yes, sir. Again, we anticipate we'd come to you in your first meeting in October, and we'd request two appropriations. One from the community investment tax for purchase of the asset. Second, and it wouldn't be an appropriation in so much as a redistribution of what is already contained in the budget, approximately $400,000 for the staffing of that asset to expand EMS service in East Tampa.
And that is, let me make sure we have it clear, for a full-time EMS unit in East Tampa, correct?
Now, I'd defer to the chief of fire if that's a full-time. My understanding is it's a peak service.
It is a peak service unit.
Explain to the crowd what a peak service is, Chief, so I can get a clear understanding, because to me, that's not a full-time service. That's a hot zone type issue for a car to come out during a hot time. And I'm trying to figure out when are those hot times, because anybody can have a heart attack or multiple heart attacks or shooting can happen at any second. So explain to me what that means.
Sure. The way that the system works currently is that it is we have an ALS system within the city of Tampa. In that ALS system, there are ALS engines, which provides advanced level of care, medicines, and defibrillation, electrical therapy for those that are in need. The engine companies roll out in concert with the rescue units. Not every station would have a rescue unit assigned to that station. We match the risk with the resources, the density. There's several avenues that we currently validate and review on a consistent basis for that. What the peak units do, if there is a rise in any particular area or system, we have the availability to place a rescue unit in the area or areas for certain periods of time while the busy part of the day goes on. We have established 2 of these units previously with great success in the North Tampa area, and they're staggered starts. One starts and goes from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening, and one starts at 10 and goes to 10 p.m. And what it does is it shunts the use of the regular rescue cars. It puts things back to scale, so one district is not out of a line or out of service for any exorbitant length of time. So, Councilman, you're correct. It's not a 24-hour, but I believe that any consideration for a plus of service, I understand how hard the men and women work on Tampa Fire Rescue, and any plus of service is a good thing. And I think that as we move forward in this plus of service, this additional unit, it is additional unit that would be beneficial to the city and beneficial to the area of East Tampa. I believe that a plus service of a peak unit is viable and is a great place to start.
I guess my concern is that the lack of non-service or peak service for over 15 years, possibly 15 years in East Tampa, I guess that sticks out with me. And then two, we're talking about an additional peak, which means 3 peak units, and that's overtime, correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
So if we're talking overtime, I don't understand why we not having talking about a full unit there versus paying 3 peak units and overtime price. But my big issue is that we have an ambulance service that we charge our taxpayers. Every time a taxpayer takes a ride, that's roughly about $800 a ride, is it not?
Yes, sir.
$800 for our citizens. And the city being a self-insured, those who may have insurance or may not have insurance, we're still collecting those people who don't have insurance, and they're getting that change out of their pocket to pay possibly $800 for a ride, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I look at that number. That's over probably last year, these numbers, we raised the increase from 18 and 19. So we're saying our mileage is $14 a mile. Is that correct?
That sounds about
so
right.
When I do the numbers of years 17 and 18, and I know 18 is going to be a lot of money, because last year, roughly, about $10 million for ambulance services?
Yes.
So roughly $10 million. So for you to tell me, or staff to tell me, that my citizens and my taxpayers are paying roughly over $10 million, and they're being charged a service, and they don't have their own ambulance service in a district, that's concerning to me. And that should be concerning to staff and you as the fire chief. They're saying, well, where's that money going? Is it going into the general fund? Well, my thing is, if our citizens are paying this money, it should be in some type of trust or another offshore account to where we can say this money should be replenishing our fire department, replenishing the rescue cars, fire engines, and so forth, and we're getting those type of dollars. So to me, I'm kind of baffled. You being the fire chief, no disrespect, being the fire chief, if we're getting this kind of money, I'm just wondering how are we saying we can't afford a rescue car?
Well, every year we go through the budget process, just like you hear the budget process, and we certainly prescribe the needs that we have in the fire department. It goes to it is not of the chief's making to decide the money flow and decide which bucket that goes into. But what the chief does do is make sure that the service of the city as a whole goes up. And that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to convey that. So, again, I look at it as a plus service for that. I understand the point that you have about the billing and the questions that you have. I do. They're legit. But all I'm looking for is I'm very ecstatic that the mayor has taken upon herself to look at this as a plus service. I'm ecstatic that the city council is looking at this as a plus service, and that we can add service to the citizens.
Well, and I understand, Chief, and I understand you run the department. I understand that sometimes decisions are not of your making. I understand that. But as the councilman for a district and for the city, when I make a decision or vote, I vote for the whole city at times. But in this instance, I have to look at the folks in East Tampa, and I have to look at what people are paying, and to look at what people are paying, and to say that we don't have a rescue in that district, it upsets me. I'm going to be honest with you. So I've got some concerns about my request for a full-time service not being implemented into the budget. Chief of Staff, you can respond to it, but we've had conversations, but I'm just, when I get these numbers, and I'm like, well, how do we not have that? I'm not understanding.
Yeah, I just want to make a point of clarification. I know when the original budget presentation, which was really before I started on August 1st, I want to say that there was 9 new rescue units going back into service, and I believe we could pull up the slide or the data, but I just want to clarify there is ambulance service in the district. There's and the chief could probably solidify
Three in
that.
the
So it's
district.
not like there's none and then there will be one. I think even as many as 5 units are going into the district. This is an enhanced level of service on the outer edges of the district to make sure that the fire department is keeping up with the pace of the calls, as the chief alluded to. But I just wanted to clarify that it's not going from 0 to 1, it's going from many to an additional
But
1.
those cars are cars that are gonna be taken out of service and put at that particular station with that right now. So, am I correct? The cars that we're allocating.
The
are
cars
going-
that are allocated in the budget are replacement
Replacement.
vehicles. Yes, sir, they are.
So really, we're not getting a replacement for the east side. You're just gonna take one of those that you were gonna do as a replacement and say, we'll give them a car over there and it'll be a peak car. That's how I read that. Is that correct?
Well, one of the new cars will be a P car. Yes, sir, it will. Again, but it is not the service is there for that. Now, there may not be an ambulance in that area at Station 16, but the service is there. And again, we're trying to bring it all up together, but we constantly look at that. We're an accredited agency. We hold an ISO 2, and you can't get that without having having disparate sections of response. But I understand your question, and we're trying to get there. Again, I look at it as a plus service for that.
And again, I understand, Chief. I just look at me being a person who was in public service, sitting there waiting for, you get a engine there, but we're still waiting for a rescue car to get there. So I understand both ends of the spectrum. So it's not like I'm new to the game. I understand the game. I know how it's played. I just want to make sure that now that I'm sitting in this chair, that I'm getting a good deck of cards so I can play with my community and the whole city of Tampa as a whole. I see the unions here, and I know they've got, I want to ask them a couple of questions as well in reference to.
And before you do that, I know Councilman Miranda had a
Yeah,
question.
Thank you. There was something, Chief, and Mr. Goods, that I heard about billing. And as I understand it in the past, I don't know how it is now, when someone uses it and doesn't have the funds to pay and they're billed, do you mean that all the bills are paid, or they stop after the second time they notice them? They don't mess with them anymore. They don't send them out.
They're noticed. I would defer to the CFO.
I'm
I would
saying.
defer to
I
the
heard that.
CFO. There were multiple times to collect
Yeah,
on the
I want to
payment.
make sure that
Yes.
it's, yes, sir.
Yes, exactly what the fire chief said. We attempt to get payment when we're billing those services. We attempt repeatedly. We do it both internally and as part or in connection with a third-party vendor. But to clarify, of the $700 or $800 it costs to provide ambulance service, we typically only receive a little under $400, less than half of that, due to indigent citizens, write-offs, non-payment, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And Councilman Carlson, and then what I was actually going to do is, because I know this is one of the main issues in dispute, after y'all's presentation, I was going to give a few minutes to Mr. Greco and other folks over there, maybe 5 minutes or so to speak, and then we can ask that question. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I just want to quickly, Chief Bennett, Mr. Bennett, would you mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're okay with it, would you mind telling us what your experience was in Pinellas and what your, we talked about this a little bit before, but what you would plan on doing over the next year with that experience?
Well, certainly my first responsibility is to support the standardized level of service that is required by the fire department citywide. And that means, just like the other public safety services, every doorstep, every intersection is getting a standardized level of service that meets the best practices, which we rely on the department to provide those to us. The Pinellas model was unique in a sense because we had 18 fire departments, but the county also had its own ambulance service. So there was almost a dual level of response. The fire department would be first on scene, much like what the fire chief spoke about, that an engine could get there, provide those life-saving services, get the response time on target, and then the ambulance ride could either be advanced life support or basic life support after the initial response. Pinellas was a different model, basically about 600 transports a day. We had a very strong billing model. Those are the things that Chief and I have had a chance to talk about in my whopping 22 days on the ground, and we're looking forward to supporting this. And just to reiterate what he said, our hope was to increase the level of service in East Tampa based on what's been discussed since the budget was presented, and then really get into this strategically after the 1st of October and get the level of service citywide as through the chief's strategic plan.
I think the point is the end thing that you, in this budget, you all are providing a higher level service than originally budgeted, but you're going to spend the next year evaluating the entire strategy and the entire process, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, absolutely. I think the trifecta at least will be the fire chief as his department, the CFO, and myself with 35 years of public safety background are going to work together along with anybody who wants to be involved in that process to make sure it's transparent. But the ultimate goal is to get the services to the citizens citywide, and I think this is a commitment to show that progress tonight by the mayor adding the additional peak service unit until we can explore that final number and make sure that we're not only in the strategic plan today, but as the city is progressively growing, we need to make sure that those level of service standard is met in all public safety aspects, just like the infrastructure we've already talked about.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Dingfelder.
I'll wait until after public comment.
Okay. Any other questions of the administration from council? I had just quick, if I may. I keep on hearing different numbers. The costs on the full-time staff sought versus peak. What is your position on what that is?
The cost, well, I know what was budgeted. He has the actual cost.
The peak service cost for staff is just a little under $400,000 we anticipate. The full-time service is $1.1 million.
Okay, so the difference is we're talking about 700,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just making sure. That for me is an issue, and I've talked about it with folks before. Is where's that money going to come from? Public safety. We all agree here, obviously. Chief Bennett, Chief Nick, Mayor Castor, former Chief Castor, we all agree that public safety is a big issue. But step number 2 is, where's that money going to come from? And how can I call it, a dismissive type of response as to the reserves, for example, I don't think should fly here tonight. We have to be responsible with that. If we're going to take this thing forward, if we are, and if it shows that it's a public safety necessity, there's got to be mathematics applied there. I think that's certainly something that's very important. What is the response time out there? Is that something that's known at this time?
Well, the response time, especially in the 16 area, I did do some research, and look, the runs are extent for the boxes that are all covered for areas of 10 and 16. But for medical priority calls, okay, and a first unit response, first on scene, what we want is 8 minutes and 30 seconds, 8 minutes or 30 seconds or less. That is a response time. Currently, we're right at almost 7:30. So we're under that currently now with first unit response. So service is being met. I hear all is what's said, but we are providing the service there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilman Citro, and then I'll ask Mr. Greco.
Just a couple quick questions. But when you're pulling from another station for emergency vehicle to 10 or 16, does that leave that station vulnerable?
Well,
will then another emergency vehicle have to come from outside of that area? So then, is it a domino effect?
Yes, of course. It is surge, and that's what the peaks tried to help to do. Governments across the country do not have the latitude to put a station on every corner, and we understand that. And Mr. Goods understands from his previous life about a surge and when you get things out of district, so to speak. And that does happen, and you will get those pulls. We follow what ISO regulates, and we try to have, that's why the geography of the fire stations are so important. We want a 1.5 mile radius for engine company access, so and it has a lot to do with the fire growth and making sure that we respond closely, but it will draw those out, and this is why the peak plan had helped in the North Tampa area, is to not get those units dispersed to where you have a longer response time catching a unit from a southern area, so to speak. Yes, it does impact.
Again, Chief, I'm not, no disrespect to you, but how many rescue calls are made per day in the area, of East Tampa, specifically stations 10 and 16? 3, 4, 5?
No. There's probably close to 60 calls a day, something like that. Now, all of those may not.
Specifically
yes,
for the ambulance.
40 to 60 is probably a good estimation. Now, all those may not bear a transport. All those may not be. Those are all kinds of calls. but, in totality, because in a year's time on some of those, as far as the district for 16, you may have 3,000 calls, in all of those areas. But the call number is not the sole factor. It's specifically when you drill down as to what the items are.
Can you give us the staffing on each emergency vehicle? You have to have a lieutenant?
If you're talking a rescue unit, you have a
Yes.
lieutenant and you have a paramedic, yes.
Just those two people?
Yes, sir.
Do we have enough staff for an emergency vehicle to be at either 10 or 16? Full-time?
We don't currently, we don't. We have outside of the peak units, we have openings for positions of paramedic and officers that we don't have them filled yet because we don't have the bodies for that.
Okay, do we have an emergency vehicle right now for either Station 10 or 16?
Well, we have reserves. We have reserve vehicles that we could utilize for that. Yes, we do. In lieu of the new unit coming in, yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilman Goods.
I guess I look at medical priority, and some people would say a person who's shot, a person who's having a heart attack, a person who scraped their knee, and again I go back to a lot of people get upset about sometimes when they call in on our 911 system, and they get frustrated. And the people, they don't know. All they know is I got an emergency. And I think at times, we don't mark it right because citizens get upset because they feel, where is the ambulance? They don't know about the BLS unit or what an ALS unit stands for. All they know, we're looking for service. So I think also people got to be educated a little bit more about our service and why we have an ALS unit respond and why we have a BLS unit respond and the difference. Because when people get on that phone and we're asking a bunch of questions, all they care about is you ain't getting here fast enough. So what I would say, Chief, is we need to market better on that aspect as well so people can understand so they don't get frustrated and we get calls, my office, about the ambulance service. And I get budgets. I get that. I understand. But when I look at public safety, it's critical. And I know Mr. Chairman and Mr. Carls, they holler about the reserves. I understand reserves, but just like if you got a savings account at your house, when the AC comes out, or you need an AC unit, you got to go into your reserve, your savings, to take care of business. This is taking care of business. When I look at what our reserve has, and when I look across the country, when I talk to some bond people, make some calls, and I look at what they tell me, Tampa has the best. They call it a super rating. We're at 23%, and they look at with these bonds at 16.5 something. So when people tell me about the bond, about reserves, and I say we got this amount of money and we got household chores we need to take care of, that's how I look at that. I look at it like if it was my home and my money. Because when something breaks in your home, sometimes you can't wait to fix it. You have to fix it. So to talk about reserves, we have a robust reserve, and it's one of the best in the country. Known wide, we are assets to liability. We are a sustainable city with what we have. And we have well enough money. If we have things to take care of, we can take care of. So to me, about the reserves and the bonds, to me that just doesn't work for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay. Next, I wanted to ask, because again, a central issue and dispute here is this fire issue. Just to come forward for questions, 754. Mr. Greco, Mr. Carter.
Joe Greco, President of Tampa Firefighters Local 754, Andrew Carter, Vice President of the local. We'd like to present just some numbers. These are real numbers from the city stuff.
When we discussed, Joe, you said what, a couple, 3-4 minutes?
Well, you gave the city quite a bit of time. I'd like to discuss our side of it. That way everybody understands.
Before, so that
I'll
we can
take
have
whatever
it.
you give me. So
Is 4 minutes good?
whatever you give me.
We hereby bequeath it. Go ahead.
Some quick things. This didn't come out in the original budget. This came up after the original budget. So we've been talking about additional units and trying to get more people in play. And putting the 2.5 years ago, we put these two peak units in service. They haven't became full time for some reason, and the numbers that haven't changed. Station 13, Station 18 are well over 4,000 calls per station. Those peak units haven't alleviated and taken the burden off. It's just kept them from running 5,000 calls a year. Those peak units are part-time, and they're designated. They leave from a certain place, but they go where the call load is. So what this new peak unit's doing is it might leave out of Station 16, but it's going to go where the call volume is. So to say it's designated there, it's a part-time unit that's staffed with overtime personnel that get overtime money, and it's not going to fix the problem. We tried to fix some of the problem. Those two cars, one of them ran 1,300 calls part-time, the other one ran 1,000 calls part-time. And that's to date. That's not at the end of the year. Those numbers are real, 1,300 calls and 1,000 calls, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. Nothing on Sunday, nothing on Monday, which are two very busy days. So they didn't eliminate anything in North Tampa. They just kept the two units up there that are running 4,300 calls and 4,100 calls from running 5,000 calls, which anything over 3,000 is ridiculous, but 4,000 calls at Station 20, or at Station 13, and 4,000 calls at Station 18, which is the unit that Chief of Staff said would be crossing in, those ones that cross over into Station 16's area, is Station 18 from 30th and Hillsborough. And the other unit is Station 4 in Ybor City, which is the sixth busiest rescue in the city, running just over 3,500 calls a year. We did a study just on Charlie, Delta, and Echo responses, which is with a fire truck. It's a serious call. We didn't do any of the other calls they would be running or Station 16 running anybody else's calls. We only did ones in their geographical area, their first alarm area. Let's look at those.
So right here is a rough approximation of Station 16's
And
first alarm.
if you could just state your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew Carter, Vice President, Tampa Firefighters. This is a rough approximation of Station 16's first alarm territory. The black numbers are our stations. 16, 10, 4, and 18 are the main ones that we're going to look at right here. So Station 16 and 10 only have engines. So their territories are split between Rescue 18 and Rescue 4. However, Station 4 and Station 18 also have their own response areas. So they split two different stations, so they have roughly two entire stations worth of first alarm territory. So when you look at the numbers, we asked staff for a report of the Charlie, Delta, and Echo calls. What that means is that there's you wouldn't catch all of it, I'm sorry. So what that means is there's a fire truck and an ambulance dispatched to this call. Like Chief said, it may not result in a transport, it might be a refusal, it might be a downgrade to a BLS. So staff gave us a number of 1,827. When we did our calculations and we pulled all of the calls that both of these units run, we came to a number of 1,737. So they're very close. And those calls, that additional 90, could come from Station 18 responding into that area, Station 4 responding into that area. So we say those numbers are relatively equal. Station 10's territory should get redistricted. It should be Station 4 with Rescue 4, Rescue 16, and Rescue 10. When you add in the quarter of calls that are yet to come, Rescue 16 would run approximately 1,800 calls. That would place it at this orange line. Every car below it would run less calls than a full-time car at Rescue 16. And these are approximate numbers that we retrieved from our own run database.
So what we're saying is that Station 16, if you put a full-time rescue there, wouldn't be the slowest car on the block. It would be the sixth slowest car on the block. The two peak units that we're talking about that are staffed with overtime personnel, they're well below at 1,300 and 1,000, and they're part-time, 5 days a week. You put a rescue car at 16 full-time, it's going to run 1,800 calls for the year, and those are only Charlie, Delta, and Echo, which are the more serious. They get a fire truck with their response, potentially ALS call. That station would then be the seventh busy, or the seventh from the seventh slowest rescue. There would be, man, that buzzer messed me up. Anyway,
They're a lot slower rescues.
putting another one, first of all, just so you know, those peak units are staffed with voluntary overtime. If they don't get a volunteer, they don't go in service. If they're down for any reason out of service, we don't put them in service. So Station 16 wouldn't have a rescue all the time just because we're saying we're putting another peak unit in service. We only have a defined amount of people.
In just a second.
I need 1 minute.
Wait. I'll give you all 20 seconds to end, but before that, I want to ask everybody in the crowd to please not make any comments, et cetera, as we're running a meeting. So if y'all would please, I would appreciate. Okay, 20 seconds to finish.
Real quick, so that peak unit wouldn't be designated at Station 16. It might leave the station out of 16, but it wouldn't be designated, and it wouldn't be in service all the time. Only when it got in which it does most of the time get a volunteer for that, but it's not mandatory, it's volunteer. As the burnout happens, you're going to lose those people. There's only a defined amount of people that work that, lieutenant, paramedic, that work that overtime. When those people are not going to work it, that service will not be available. You've already got 2 cars that are very busy running into that area.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and wait, y'all.
Questions? I got questions. Yeah, questions.
Mr. Councilman Carlson.
I'm totally confused by what you just said.
Which one?
Can I just ask you a simple question? What are you recommending?
Well, we've been talking, I mean, the city's been in need of full-time rescue cars for a long time, and I don't know where the failure has been at. I don't want to blame anybody, whether it's city staff or fire department staff, but we're well behind in ordering and putting new full-time rescue cars in place. If you look at the statistics on how many calls these stations are running, our station 20 is running approximately 20 calls a day.
You're recommending more
full-time-
full-time service, but not just in this area.
Well, there's other places, and I'm sure the chief would agree, that Station 13 in the next year's budget, they're going to have to do something there because enough is enough. There's only so many runs you can run in a day. 20 is more than enough. There was one day not too long ago where they ran 46 separate calls out of Station 13, 46 separate run numbers out of that station. It's out of control. But
can I just ask you one other quick question?
Yes,
so you're looking at it citywide. If you had to put one more full-time service, where would you put it in the city?
yeah, I mean, it's been way overdue in Station 16 area. That car came out of there 17 years ago. It never went back. It went to Hannah in Nebraska to backfill. I talked to the chief who was in place when he took it out today. I talked to Chief Bodo. Rescue 11 at the time was running crazy, so it was the advice of Dr. Karuba to move the rescue car from 10, which is in, of course, East Tampa. That would have been the one running into 16, to move it to Station 7 to help backfill when Rescue 11 was out. Well, we've grown a lot since then. We've went from running 60,000 calls then to almost 90,000 calls now. Now you're talking about in just 16's area every day, Charlie Delta and Echo responses would be 5 calls a day. Just Charlie Delta and Echo in their geographic area. Not to mention the calls they would run into 4's area, into 18's area, and all the other places. Because we're all still going to cross transfer. We're all still going to go into other districts or into other areas. You never sit in your designated geographic location. You go to where the call is and wherever the availability is. So we're closest unit response. If 16 is designated in East Tampa, it's going to run calls in Ybor City. It's going to run calls in downtown Tampa. And coming very soon in the Sparkman's Wharf district, when all those towers are full down there, it's going to be running down there that we haven't planned for. So a designated unit at 16, full-time, is what's called for here. You can say that putting a part-time unit in place is trying to help. It's not helping. It's making people that are already
Mr. Greco,
overworked
thank
work
you very
overtime
much.
more.
Thank you very much, sir. Any
All right.
other questions, Mr. Carlson? Councilman Dingfelder. Oh, no, you're still.
I thought you were telling me to go away.
Oh, no.
Who's up next? Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation, and Mr. Greco, thank you for your passion.
Yes, sir.
We know you love the city, and we know you love the fire department. I had a question, don't hang around on the side in case somebody else has a question.
Yes,
but
sir.
I had a question for either the Chief Bennett or Chief of the Fire Department, one or the other, whoever wants to take the question. But Chief, somebody mentioned Chief Bodo, I think Mr. Greco did, and he's home recuperating. We all send him our best. He texted me, and of course he was chief for a long time, and he got his 30 plus years in with the fire department. He texted me and he said back when he was chief, we had a 4-minute response time, or 4.5 minute response time, and he said now we're talking about double that, 8.5 minutes. Of course, he feels that's unacceptable. I'd like to know if that's fairly accurate from this the city's perspective. Mr. Greco, you can chime in as well afterwards, and how we feel about it. And listen, I'm not delusional thinking we're going to solve this tonight, but I just want to know if it's on our menu to be solving it and getting to a better place over the next year or so, or what specifically is our plan to get back to these numbers of, a 4 or 5 minute response time, if that's our goal. So a lot of questions there, but please enlighten me.
Thank you. Part of our strategic plan or our accreditation process allows, really, it's community-based and it's community-fed. And the whole process of that is that it's what does the community want, and what can we expect, and what can we afford to do that with. I mean, love Chief Bodo, and yes, many years ago, we did have a 4 or 5 minute response time, and we're going from 40,000 calls to 89,000 and some change, and many different miles have been added to the city. We have different areas to cover, and it makes an extreme stretch. So can we get there? It takes staffing and money to get there to do that. We are making the standard on the benchmark that we set. It is not out of realm with accreditation, and they look at fire departments. We're one of 220 some odd fire departments internationally accredited, and they go through everything and they vet through everything. And it doesn't raise the fact. They always want us to move the needle, but it doesn't raise the fact.
Is there a national standard response time or goal for response time for urban areas like ours?
Well, it's a consensus document. The NFPA has response times, and they're very tight. They're very tight, and they're more on the 4 minute response time, 6 minute response time, 4 minute travel time. To do that, you have to really make your stations a lot more dense to be able to handle that travel time. So with that, it takes more units and it takes more staffing if that's the deal.
It seems to me before you start building more stations, at least you need to make sure the cars are there in the stations that you have, correct?
Right. Well, we do, and that is the reason.
No, I mean, in terms of maxing them out. I know you're moving them around and that sort of thing. And again, I'm not saying we're trying to solve this tonight.
Oh, I understand.
I'm just saying, well, it's an interesting discussion. I appreciate your response. Mr. Greco, do you have anything to add?
I absolutely do. Chief LoCicero is exactly right.
I don't know if you ever said your name for the record.
Joe Greco. Chief LoCicero is right. We do get to every call. We initiate care at an ALS level with all the ALS engines in the city. It's the transports that we're failing at, because it's not that the staff doesn't want it or anything like that. It's because we haven't moved the needle in the last 16 years. We haven't added those rescues that have been required. We're relying on these rescues to run so many calls a day that you're getting decreased level of care just because they're so wore out. Not because they want to, but when you're up 24 hours, all that care that you would have been at 10 calls is going to be different than it's at 20 calls, just because of your level of tiredness. So we do get to the calls. It's nothing having to do with staff saying that they don't want it. We need to start moving it because the city's growing and we're behind now on rescue cars. We have sufficient engines to cover the city. We have sufficient tower trucks to cover the city. We don't have sufficient rescue cars to haul the bodies, or we wouldn't have rescue cars running 4,300 calls and 4,400 calls a year. Those are real numbers. You can go and get, Chief LoCicero can provide those to you. These cars are running crazy. We need some more transport calls, and putting another peak car in place is, like I said last time, a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. It's overtime from people that don't have to work it. It's voluntary. So that means when they don't want to work it, if there isn't enough people to staff it, it doesn't leave the station. So then Orlando Goods' Station 16 doesn't have a rescue car, or Station 12 or wherever else it was for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Greco.
Yes, sir.
The only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is I heard not for you, Joe, Mr. Chairman, I heard a comment earlier from somebody, and I think it might have been Mr. Greco, that said that a lot of this time is filled by off-duty folks or overtime. And again, this issue of what is our efficiency in using overtime. And a couple of weeks ago when we were looking through the budget and I was asking questions, we've got some big overtime numbers. I think it was $7, $8, $9 million of overtime, and a lot of that is in police and fire. Most of it is in police and fire. So again, we're not going to solve this tonight, any of those issues, but I'm confident Mr. Bennett we'll be addressing those over the next year with us.
One more statement, just one quick one. Why is it that we've had?
Wait, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Greco, let's hold off on that, and so let's do some more questions. Councilman Cruz.
I guess what concerns me now more than ever is we talk about overtime and we talk about when people don't want to work. So if you're saying there are peak cars and people don't want to work, then there's no car that's leaving the house. So my question, again, if we don't have a full-time staff, then we don't have people giving service in a community. So I like Chief Lizzo to come up, because is what Mr. Greco saying is true. We're running 5 days, we don't run 2, but if people don't want to work, then those cars don't run.
Let me address you but let me address it real quick.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know he was talking back to you.
The peak days and times were picked just because they were peak days and times. Those vary. We continually look at them, but that was originally why it was set in the manner in which it was. The other thing is that it is voluntary. I do agree. It's totally voluntary for them. We have not had any issues with serviceability of those really on any great scale. I understand that this would be another, and we would, I would answer that by saying that I would just look at that and we would manage that as we would. We would adjust. We'd adjust our deployment all the time to fit the need of what the circumstance is, and we would look at that. So I don't see that to be a problem. It could be a problem, but we would adjust.
And Councilman Carlson, and then after your question, I'm actually going to move to public comment, because we have people here who have been waiting for a very long time. There's going to be a lot of time afterwards to engage and ask questions, but you're going to be the last question, sir, before public comment.
Mr. Greco, we have a new chief of staff, a new mayor. The chief of staff and the mayor are going through, I think, every department in the city, looking from top to bottom at how to improve it, and they're making a lot of changes. And Chief Bennett has said that he's going to look at this department and all the departments. Do you think that what you said is this that we're talking about is a Band-Aid right now? It seems like we need to look at this systemically, and the union needs to partner with the fire chief and the chief of staff and the mayor. Is it possible over the next year that you all can all partner and look at this systemically and come back with a recommendation earlier than we got stuck with this at the last minute, and it sounds like there are issues that we need to address, but we need to look at them in a strategic way so that it's solved overall.
Okay. So this is the first time this has gotten any traction. This isn't the first time this has been brought up, whether through labor management or anything else. I've been here through 3 mayors and quite a few chief of staffs, and we've been kicking the can for long enough. We are at the level where enough is enough. If anybody will put a number, if I hear that saying one more time, when's enough? We've talked about this forever. This isn't something that just popped up. That rescue car is needed. The numbers are there to prove it. You can put another peak unit in, but if you only got a defined amount of people that can ride that rescue car, and when they're done, when they're burned out, which they are, when they're done, the peak unit doesn't run anymore because it's not mandatory. It's voluntary. It's asking. It's not telling. So it's not the fix. It is a quick fix to a big problem, but it's not the fix. And if you're saying work with staff to get it on the handshake deal, I'd love to. I'd love to have a good conversation that means something, that things get done. But here recently, things aren't getting done. And I spoke to Mr. Bennett today. I'd love good handshake deals again to make things happen. But depending on what happens in the next year, maybe something tanks and all of a sudden now it's gone again. So you can't rely on having good conversations and handshake deals anymore to make anything, to say that we're going to talk about it. It's through talking. You got people that are getting out of the rescue division because they can't take it anymore. It's the only time in my career here that I've seen more people trying to get out of rescue than trying to get into rescue. When I came on, you couldn't get the people out of rescue. They loved rescue. Now they don't love rescue because we're beating them up every single day.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. And I had missed Councilman Miranda before. Go ahead, sir. Last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate everything that the fire department and the union representative, and also I appreciate everything that Chief Bennett has. In my years of experience here, no one has been as accommodating to everyone, and I mean this sincerely, and I don't flatter people, as Chief Bennett. He has been very accommodating, He does it in a way that he's not insulting to anyone. He's very soft-spoken. The only thing I don't like about him is that he's a left-handed strong pitcher. I can never hit him. But aside from that, you have to have, and I'm asking both, the union and the fire department, and really the whole city. You see, when you want to get out of someplace, you have to have a plan where you're going. And as I look at the plan, what's going to happen in 10 years? You got to have a 10-year plan. I had it all my life, where I wanted to do the next 10 years. Whether I fail to success depends who you ask. But in saying that, I mean this. In 2026, and I heard the mentioned CIT tax, guess what? It is over. Se acabó, gone. Unless you pass another one, which I doubt it will pass. What does that mean then? You're talking now about fire rescue, engines, and the good sort of people who work there. What are they going to be driving? A fire engine is not inexpensive. It's about $750,000. An ambulance is about $500,000, fully equipped. What are you going to do then? You better start thinking not for today, not for that car, because that car is needed, there's no doubt. However, what are you going to do then? Where's the money coming from? The city's going to continue to grow. And I've had emails today say, stop everything. No more people coming in. Stop building. I can't build a wall. And I'm not in Congress, and if I was there, I wouldn't build a wall. But let me say this. What's going to happen in 10 years? So not only do you have to think of what you're going to do to this 4 years, Chief, your next 4 years, what's going to happen in 2026? You have to think way, way far in advance. And you may have to make some calculation changes because all those are projections. But in doing that, you're going to find that the needs are going to extensively grow if we're going to have a 35 to 40% increase in population. That's what the consensus said. What's going to happen then? Are your roads ready? And that, who knows what the Supreme Court's going to do on that tax for roads. It may go up and it may go down. And then what happens? What happens if that tax is not passed? You're going to have fire engines, what, on potholes? I went to a function Sunday. I was approached about 10 people, and 9 out of the 10 talked to me only about roads. One lady talked to me about water, and I asked her where does she live. She said Sarasota. That's true, I ain't lying to you. Name is Vega. And so what I'm saying is today, and I'm not trying to lead anything, I believe in trust and verify. I've said that many times here. But in the case of the chief, I've seen and watched everything that's asked of him, and it was on trust. And it was verified because everything he said up to this date, he's come right through. That third pitch was a strike on the outside corner. So he's done everything accordingly to what he said. So he's earned my trust. The verification is for the unions and the chief and the administration to get together, not to plan for next year, but you better have a plan for 10 years because that growth is coming. Whether you want it, I don't want it, guess what's happened in Tampa? The grandkids used to go to college somewhere else and stay there. The grandkids are going to college and coming back. And thank God they are, because I couldn't afford an airplane ticket. So what I'm saying is, it's a wonderful place to live. You can say anything you want about the city of Tampa. It's so bad that it's going to grow by 40%. That's how terrible it is. And when you look at the things we do, and I'm not going to get to things we don't do, but it's incumbent upon the 7 of us to understand that that man's got a job to do, and so far he hasn't let me down, and he hasn't let the citizens down. So I trust him until tomorrow, depending on what he does. So I appreciate what he's done. I appreciate his mannerism and his lack of charisma, because you're not selling anything, you're saying the facts. And that's what I like about this chief. So I'm willing to listen furthermore what council members are going to say, and I understand that, but I think we're heading in the right direction, and I appreciate everything the unions brought up. Certainly they're all factual and truth. But you also better plan for 10 years.
We better plan for next year.
No. If you plan for 10 years, sir, you're planning for next year within the 10 years.
That'd be wonderful.
But if you plan for next year only, you got 9 years you're going to lose because you're not ready for it. That's what happens in life. And that's how it is today. Society has changed. People haven't changed. The system has changed. They get elected to raise money. And I'm not talking about us. And then when they don't get elected, they keep the money. I never saw that when I was living 1860 County Court. Never heard of anything like that. My father told me things when I was a kid that I thought it was nuts. And now I'm going to go to the grave and talk to him because he was right. I was a guy that was nuts. But he also had much more experience than I did. So I see what this council is going to do, and I appreciate both. Certainly your presentation was more than superb. It was to the point, as the chief was just also. Two different views arriving at the same conclusion. I understand. There's differences. There's always going to be differences unless you live single. If you live with a wife, she's going to tell you what to do. But thank God that we're here today, and thank God that this city has gotten where it's at today. And it didn't get here because of elected officials. It got here because of the people in Tampa wanting to make it better for their children to stay here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And also want to echo Councilman Miranda's comments as to Mr. Bennett. I've only dealt with him, I guess, 22 days or so. But I'm a person that outside of my city council job, I've been a lawyer for 15, 16 years, often dealing in really much larger cases. And you kind of learn at my age, I'm 41 years old in my practice, on who to trust and who not to trust. And so far, not only have I not had any reason not to trust John Bennett, but I've had every reason to trust him. But you know who I trust just as much as John Bennett? Joe Greco. Those are two men that I trust a whole lot. So this is something where I do hope that there is a lot of cooperation and a lot of work together to be done. And I think something that Councilman Carlson said is very true, which is this is a city-wide issue. We talk about Station 13. We talk about East Tampa. This is a real city-wide issue. And it leads me to the belief that the city of Tampa does not have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem, okay? We have a lot of needs that surpass our revenue. That is a discussion that we had 2 years ago, and that's a discussion that we need to have again in the future. No one likes to talk about it, but it's a fact. Because these aren't wants, okay? This isn't something that is a preference. This is public safety. This is police. This is fire. This is somebody's having a heart attack, and you got to get EMS out there. Somebody's a victim of a crime. You got to get a police officer out there. These are needs. These are needs, and that's an important issue. So we're going to go to public comment, and if everyone, please, who is going to be speaking tonight on the item, if you could please, just so that we have an idea, raise your hands. Okay, good. Now, furthermore, after raising your hand, if you could please come forward to my left, I guess y'all's right, line up against the wall if you're able to do so, and get in line for public comment, 3 minutes a person, and please begin by stating your name.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ella Coffey, citizen here of the city of Tampa, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the need of services in East Tampa. East Tampa needs a full-time rescue squad. We lost a rescue squad, and our community seems to continue to lose things, and I don't have the great confidence that we're ever thought about when we're talking about replacing. Now is a time that we need to replace the rescue squad in East Tampa. It needs to be our top priority because it is about safety. It is about transporting people in their time of need, their crisis, when they need city services the most. Mr. Miranda, Councilman Miranda spoke about 40% growth. If there's 40% growth happening in Tampa, then taxes are increasing here in Tampa. We're collecting more money. So we shouldn't have an issue about where the money is going to come from. If we're spending $400,000 on a peak time, part-time car, and double it plus maybe another 20% gives us a full-time 7 days, 24 hours. That's a much better fit for the city of Tampa. We've got to stop kicking the can down the road. We have 5 units going into this area to help, And if it has its own rescue squad, it's going to be the 7th busiest rescue squad here in the city. It's not an A-plus service with the peak. It's a service. These are services that the city is required to provide, and we need to make sure we're providing them equally throughout the entire city. No other part of the city loses services like East Tampa, and we're ignored. I ask that you all consider the full-time versus the peak, because we have full-time people that get sick and they need services when they need services. And it's not, we may not choose to have a heart attack on Tuesday at 12 o'clock when we have a peak service. It may happen Sunday night at 11 p.m. And if we're not there to provide the services, I'm afraid that the city is going to be sued when a family loses their family member or their loved one because we weren't there to provide the service. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Betty J. Bell, B-E-L-L. I live at 3003 Star Street, Tampa, 33605. I'm here today representing all seniors living in East Tampa. We have been deprived of senior exercise and communication for many years by having to leave the various rec centers when children are released from school. Speaking of one group, the Jazzy Seniors, we were blessed to get permission to use Reagan Center about 5 years ago. Because we don't have to leave at 12 noon, our membership has grown to over 180 plus seniors. We meet on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We have many activities going on in one big room. Example, shuffleboard, bingo, cards, dominoes, arts and craft, dancing, aerobics, exercise 2 days a week, vendors and cooking. We go on outings also. We are in dire need of a multicultural center that will benefit seniors as well as children, and the central location would be Al Barnes Park. East Tampa needs an ambulance for the community. It is sorely needed. For 7 square miles, we need that. We need an indoor shuffleboard court in this center that we are asking for, and separate room for different activities housed in this new center. Prayer is very important to our seniors. We have 2 chapters. We celebrate birthdays every 3 months. We have catered food and gifts for each person. Hospital stays are given $25. Immediate deaths in a family, they are given $50. Visiting nursing homes during holidays, singing and gifts are given. 4 different t-shirts are used in this group, the Jazzy Seniors. And I'd like to say thank you to all of the councilmen, and especially to Councilman Orlando Gould, who has said promises made and promises kept. We have seniors from all over the Hillsborough County area: West Tampa, Riverview, Progress Village, Carrollwood, Ruskin, Brandon, Gibsonton. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, please.
Hey, I'm Halima Smoot. I'm here on behalf of the TCB and Public Access Cable Station. I'm not here for the 1-year plan, but for the 10-year plan. And if we can incorporate our fire department and police department to kind of let the community know that this is not an easy thing, you know, that it takes money, time, effort, voices to get the money to the areas that are needed. You know, that's all I'm here for, is to support them. And I came here for a different reason, but after hearing everything and the guys speak about, you know, where money is lacking, just idea came up to incorporate. Every kid I know in these communities, when they grow up, they want to be a policeman or a fireman, but they have no idea what it takes. They have no idea how much it costs and the effort that it takes to get these things done. So that's really all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hi, Louise Thompson, the Executive Director of Tampa Bay Community Network, a service of Speak Up Tampa Bay Public Access Television. In the early 1980s, the city and the county residents each received 3 channels from the cable company: the government access channel, the public's access channel, and the education access channel. These things were run from the University of Tampa campus since the early 80s and they were run by the cable companies. The channel trained people in TV production and helped residents and nonprofits have a voice on TV. The channels were operated by the cable company until 2000, when both the city and the county asked our nonprofit, Speak Up Tampa Bay, to manage the channels. Since then, we have featured thousands of individuals and nonprofit organizations. We've improved the quality of the channels, and also expanded onto the internet, making video production training our signature programming, and also doing web streaming and providing on-demand programming and podcasting. People we've trained are employed by the local network affiliates, the other access channels, and many started their own production companies, helped on local films, etc. We had the support of the city in the amount of $550,000 annually for many years. In the past few years, we've suffered many cutbacks, and in 2017, when former Mayor Buckhorn defunded us and the Education Channel, which I'm glad you guys have put back in the budget, we went down to $207,600. The county has provided us with some money for the training of residents, but we can't do it without the city's money too. There's money. It's the $17 million that is coming from the communications services tax, where the cable companies put their money. In other cities and states, they have designated that some portion of that money coming into municipalities should go to the operation of the public education and government access channels. We currently have 511 captive students, some you'll meet tonight. In the past year, our students have taken 1,851 classes. We have an enormous demographic of minorities. And last but not least, we've cut back everything we could. No one's had a bonus or a raise in 8 years to keep this thing going. We're down to 4 employees from 15. So we really need this money. If you could ask again for some money. Last but not least, I noticed in a state statute that the operation of public educational government access channels are the responsibility of the municipality or county. And so you're responsible for these, and I hope you'll help us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Joshua Lynch. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today. I'm here also to speak about the Tampa Bay Community Network as well, and my experience with them and the education that they provided me. So I've been within the film industry for a couple months now. I'm now doing full-time a production assistant job, independent contractor through that. And I spent 2 years in college for film school, and I never got to touch a camera. I never got on-hand experience. And the Tampa Bay Community Network was one of the many people that I made cold calls to, and they provided me with the opportunity to go through their education system to be a certified television producer. And through that, I've had more hands-on experience within the last 2-3 months than I've had with any education through film, and that includes film-specific classes from Rhode Island School of Design, a very, very prestigious college for all of the arts and such. If there's anything that has helped me through getting to where I want to be, getting to the career that I've wanted to get to, it has been the Tampa Bay Community Network. And I really wish that they would be able to continue to do this for others, and for those who aren't able to afford expensive film schools that won't provide them with nearly as much as this community has. Thank you again, and I really hope that you guys will be able to come to something to help this budget for these people, and I hope you have a great day, guys.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Thanks for allowing me this time. My name is Ravin Ford, and I am also here to speak on behalf of TBCN. I've graduated from there. I'm a certified TV producer, and since then I've been able to have my own show on their network as well as expand onto YouTube. And After doing that, I've been doing it for the past 2 months, but this month I usually have a show once a month, but I can't do it this month because I can't afford it. And the reason I can't afford it is because it costs $200+ to actually rent out their studio and their control room. And you might be wondering, why does it cost that much? Well, that's because the studio has to charge people now because they don't have the funding. If they were to have that funding, they'd be able to have these classes for free as they did in the past. And people like myself and others who like to have their own shows, who want to just realize their own dreams, would be able to do it at a whim, essentially. And so filming alone isn't the only thing that people can benefit from here, and not just, it's not just that. There's also the economic benefits from it as well, because when doing TV production, you can ask for sponsorships from different companies, different small businesses, and by doing so, they will be, the producer will be able to help promote their businesses and help traffic go towards those establishments, which of course helps those businesses prosper and grow. And listen, I'm not going to go into like microeconomics and give you all the details on that, but just being able to have this opportunity and giving this opportunity to other people would mean the world to me. It would mean a lot, not only to myself, but everyone else who is here to speak on behalf of TBCN. Like, I love this place. They've given me a home. They've given me a new life. To have them be funded again would mean a lot to me, like I said, and it wouldn't help just me, it would help so many other people. And that's essentially what I've got to say. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Bishop Michelle B. Patty. I'm the pastor of Trinity and Faith Ministry. Many of members of my congregation lives in East Tampa, West Tampa, Bama Heights. Your zip code should not determine what type of service or how much service you receive. We should have a permanent fire station with the paramedics. I'm hearing them saying that it's volunteer, that times might come when people may or may not be there. Councilman Good, you hit the nail on the head. If we're going to pay overtime, then we need just a staff. It's more to pay for overtime than to staff that, have that staff there. Also, when you look at people's lives, it's already been said, you can't dictate when a heart attack, stroke, or somebody's being shot in the community. 1 minute can make the difference in a person's life. I have a nephew that is brain dead because he couldn't get oxygen to his brain. So every life is valuable. We cannot sit here and wait for the stat to come back and say how many people died because your response time was that short. When we talk about taxpayers, we're paying the same money. They don't charge the people in East Tampa any less than they do over in Davis Island. So they should not receive any less service than what anyone else is receiving. When we talk about the different community centers, I'm just sickened at the fact that you want to pit the people from different parts of the community against one another. You even putting the fire chief and Joe Greco, they're up here. Who trusts whom? No. The reality is that we all need service, and it's long overdue, as Councilman Good, you stated quite eloquent, it's long overdue. So when you look at promises that has been made over the years, we need to talk about Fair Oaks, we need to talk about the Multicultural Center, and we need to fund all of these things as a priority. African American people should not have to come here time and time again and beg and plead for what is due us. We are due because we are taxpayers, we are citizens. You're looking at the Super Bowl coming. You're looking at all these grand things coming to the city. And I pray this is not nationally televised, because it seems like we're in some foreign country where you don't care about all of the citizens. And that is not right when people pay their taxes and each one of y'all come to our community, say you're going to do something, and then we get here, it's a whole bunch of fluff. The fluff needs to stop, and people need to be taken care of. And I thank you so much for listening. And this council, I have trust in you all. I have trust in you all that you're going to do the right thing, and don't give me that excuse, the budget was already made up and you can't do anything. This is the time that you can do anything because the budget has not been passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And let's please hold applause. Thank you very much. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Ruby Lou Carr.
And
I'm a recent TBCN video producing graduate from their training program. I'm a longtime Tampa resident, and I'm a voter who votes in every single election. TBCN is worth Tampa's financial and public support. One, it's unlike schools, colleges, and universities, where students take classes, graduate, leave, and attempt to get a position in their chosen field of study. It's also unlike those schools, colleges, and universities, where students possibly can get an internship, a select few, and they hope for a long-term position or at least a good reference for their resume. And it's even unlike enlightened businesses that recognize the value of furthering their employees' education. TBCN offers something very unique. They offer an in-house venue where graduates can create, produce, get experience, and start earning income shortly after graduation. A financially healthy TBCN offers something even more valuable to people of my generation: the opportunity to transition to a new career, to continue producing goods and services, to what's called refire, not retire, and be a drain on the economy. Refired people cost less. And if cost and price are important to you, I assume they are, note the word less. We cost less. Refired people add value. We add goods and services. If goods and services are important to you, note the word add. We add. We get more for our money. I'm developing a 12-week talk series to be on TBCN, to showcase people who have gone through major life changes, and sponsored by local small businesses. That adds value. TBCN adds value. It's worth Tampa's financial and public support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, please.
Hello. I'm Antonia McCutcheon. I'm the programming coordinator for Tampa Bay Community Network, and I wanted to just give you a different perspective of who we are and even why we're more important. Yes, we do provide excellent training for the community wide. Our students come and they get full-fledged training with hands-on experience and become producers. But that's not the only thing that makes us important. The other thing is we provide video services to the community, to businesses, to nonprofits, and to especially small businesses. And I'm going to read you something that I put together. A thriving community is one that has an effective communication base. TBCN helps build the core strength of the community through the production and distribution of videos because, as statistics and trends have shown us, video owns the internet and the world. At any given moment, 80% of all traffic on the internet is video, and by 2022, that percentage is expected to rise to almost 85%. Video is an extremely powerful medium, and studies have shown that a community that effectively uses video becomes stronger economically and socially. Did you know that businesses who use video in their marketing repertoire grow 50% faster than businesses who don't? TBCN wants to continue being that organization that provides Tampa Bay with all their video needs, because video production and video marketing is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. We are not just a television station. We are everything video, especially internet video. I myself am an internet video specialist. The community needs us. Small businesses, nonprofits, individuals, they need us. Please don't allow one of the most important resources in the community to go away. We would only be going backwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, please.
Good evening, my name is Steph Teasley, and I'm a citizen in one of the greatest cities in the world, Tampa Bay. I'm here to show my support for the Tampa Bay Community Network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, please.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Fran Tate, and I reside at 3405 Clay Street in the District of 5. I am the president of the Jackson Heights Neighborhood Association and Crime Watch. We'd like to thank you for listening to us this evening and we would like to thank you for listening to us this evening. We appreciate your unwavering efforts to address our needs and make provisions. Need number 1, it is imperative that a 24-hour rescue unit be stationed in East Tampa. We all know a heart attack, a stroke, a asthmatic, diabetic, or epileptic episode, or even in my case, a hypertensive event is never scheduled. This ambulance will offer immediate life-saving attention to the residents of East Tampa. We are sure if one was located 24 hours in East Tampa, it would cut down on the response of 8 minutes and 30 seconds. We're talking life-saving time. Time is of essence when it's meant to save a life. I'm sorry. Need number 2. As a responsible citizen, we are charged with making provisions for our seniors and our children. Our city, as it moves forward, as it advances, we are in desperate need of a multicultural or a community center, whatever you want to call it. We're in desperate need of that in East Tampa. This center will provide ample space where our seniors and our children will be able to organize and participate in organized daily activities, such as Mrs. Bell stated, aerobics, shuffleboard, sewing classes, arts and crafts for the seniors. And for our children, there will be enough room in this multicultural building for them to take advantage of classes such as karate, judo, modern dance, step, ballet, just some of the things that my children were exposed to. There's so much that they could receive if we had that building. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, please.
Good evening, Councilman. My name is Tyler Martinolich. I'm the Film Commissioner for Hillsborough County. I'm here today to talk on behalf of both the TDCN as well as TBAE, which I was extremely pleased to hear was part of the budget proposal at the beginning of tonight's session. Decades ago, the FCC created provisions to ensure cable companies provide space for public education and government programming, otherwise known as PEG. Government is already well served by departments such as Tampa Zone CTTV, but the voice of the public in education is endangered if TBCN and TBAE are not supported. While it might seem quaint to think that something like public access still exists or is needed, I assure you it is. There are segments of our city that are stratified economically or of a certain age where new technologies like YouTube become intimidating and thus preventative. In addition to providing a platform to voice and share information personal to their own communities and interests, both TBCN and TBAE provide countless opportunities to intern and train Hillsborough County residents. While I'm not speaking specifically today on behalf of Hillsborough County, I can say they have been allotted money, I'm speaking specifically of TBCN, over the previous fiscal years to administer an amazingly well-received training program, and you've heard from some of those students today. If you are a Hillsborough County resident, you can take these training classes free of charge thanks to this fund provided by the county. Unfortunately, that only services a small segment of the population, and they are not able to continue their good work without additional funding. That funding would also help propel both organizations well into the future and help them modernize their technology to adapt to more immediate needs of our citizens. So with that, I just want to say again, I am in support of funding both TBCN and TBAE. I hope you'll consider making their budgets part of your forthcoming budget for this coming fiscal and also well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, please. And is this the last individual here for public comment, or is there anyone else? No? Okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Few. I reside at 4506 North 29th Street, Tampa. And I have lived in Tampa for 71 years. And I appreciate that I was afforded activities and a place to go after school, or after we got out of school, we always were able to either go to South Florida for activities, or we went on field trips. But we don't have anywhere in East Tampa right now that afford our children the same activities. And this is what bringing a multicultural building to East Tampa would do for our young people. It would keep them off the street. It would give them something positive to do with their lives. And then maybe they would make it to 71. I also believe that we pay taxes, and our taxes should afford us a emergency vehicle that is full-time, not part-time. Since we pay taxes when we are assessed them, we need the services. I have a nephew who has seizures. If he doesn't get the necessary health benefits, then he will not live. So we need the emergency vehicle. Since we pay full-time taxes, we need the full-time emergency vehicle in our area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. No one else here for public comment? Please, no clapping. Thank you very much for complying. Next, we're going to move forward with further council comments, questions before we read the millage rate. Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Hara, just wanted to get a little bit of clarification, and I think you spoke to it a little bit earlier, but I wanted some more detail. I know this is not the CRA, and we're not headed there, but I'm gonna make an assumption. Let's say, assuming the CRA approves of $1 million toward the East Tampa Rec Center. Assuming that's the case, how do you see this CIT issue playing out in October? And specifically, would that entire $2 million be, assuming we get the $1 million from the CRA, entire $2 million be appropriated for the first year or for several years? How do you work that?
The short answer to your question is both $2 million would be appropriated in fiscal year 20. Once we get approval tonight, again, at the first meeting in October, we'll bring you a resolution appropriating community investment tax in the amount of $1 million. As soon as the CRA board takes an action that we can act upon, we'll bring you another resolution appropriating that funding to the same project. So you'll have a total of $2 million in that project from two different funding sources.
Okay, and then so that's does it have a discrete name? It says the new East Tampa Rec Center, or the Orlando Goods Center or.
Yes,
no, I'm just teasing. But it's something that discreetly defines it as opposed to just general park maintenance money or something.
Yes, sir. It will have a specific description, so everybody will be clear as to what that funding is for.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Councilman Carlson.
I don't know where we're going to go on any of this, but one thing I think we need to do next time, we talked about changing the process. I hope that through our public engagement process starting in April that we'll get more of this earlier instead of later. I wish we had had all these conversations the last meeting instead of this meeting. Number two is I'm in favor of all of the things that people want. There are a lot of great things that we need, but I think the most important thing is to put money in the general fund reserve. I believe that the last mayor was fiscally reckless in spending down half of the general fund reserve. And although our bond ratings are high and it looks good, Mr. O'Hara has explained to us that the bond, what am I looking for? The bond agencies, credit rating agencies are expecting that we're going to be consistent. And so my fear is that we go into a recession in the next couple of years, and 2-3 years from now, we don't have the money to cover basic services, and we can't pull down the reserves that are tied to bonds because that will affect our ratings and our interest rates on those. We also can't. It sounds like we also cannot pull down this general fund reserve because that will affect our ratings as well. So whatever we put into this account now above the 23%, or this is, I think, keeping us even with 23%, whatever we put in is going to help us to cover basic services when the revenues are going down potentially in a couple years. And I think we have to fiercely defend that, and we can't do the same thing the last mayor did and spend all the money. So what I would suggest is if any of you want to propose that we fund any of these things, I think they're all great things, but if you want to propose something, please tell us where we're going to cut, or work with staff to figure out where we're going to cut, because I don't think we can pull down the general fund reserve anymore.
Councilman.
Well, gentlemen, you saw tonight, you saw 5 different association presidents here. You saw Jackson Heights came up. You saw College Hill. You saw Highland Pines. I see the Fair Oaks group is back there in the back, which someone tried to pit my communities against one another for my community center, which that didn't work. They're here. They said what they wanted. They told me what they wanted. It was my job to deliver, however I could deliver it. It was my job to bring it to this board about that community center. I'm not doubtful. I'm a praying type person. It's going to happen. Okay, how it's going? God's going to give us a blessing. We're going to get that center for our seniors. They've been wanting for years and been asking. So I don't really care about hearing about the reserves. I respect what everyone has said about reserve ratings, but when it comes to a certain section, if this was downtown, if this was Channel Side, this was any place else, we wouldn't all about reserves. We would try to make a way to fund it. We talk about an ambulance service. They're here. You heard the concerns. My concern deeply now is you're talking about a peak unit, which really is a part-time unit. And if you don't have staff, it doesn't come on Saturdays and Sundays. People get sick on Saturdays and Sundays. Last time I checked. So I don't understand that. I really don't. But what I do understand is this. And I don't really care about a brand new unit when I already got 2 peak units running. So that $500,000 for that unit could go to pay for those employees to work the 2 units you already have as a peak unit for a full-time unit. That makes common sense to me until we can afford to get in next budget a unit, because all you did was you allocated dollars to replace units. I don't need you to replace a unit for 16. I need you to go at those peak units you got. They're running 50 and 51. Put those back in service at 16. Take that money that you're talking about buying that one rescue car. Don't buy that rescue car. Put that for salaries to get that unit as a full-time unit for the people in East Tampa. That's where the money can come from, Mr. Carson. To me, that's a fix. To me, that's a fix. It's a service. So when it's time for motions, I'm going to make my motion later on. I'll reserve my right for everybody else, but I just think that there is a way, there's a will, and we can get it done. This council can do it.
And let me, if I may, say something. And please, Guys, please, this is the third time we're trying to run a meeting here. Please respect the council. Thank you very much. I want to say with something with regards to that, which is the things that this council, just sitting here in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has already done to move the needle forward and to have real great progress, particularly for East Tampa. I believe, if I'm reading the numbers right, whenever it comes to the increased service for East Tampa for fire, there's an increased investment of about $800,000, give or take. A couple weeks ago, this council, everybody, 7-0, 110% standing behind East Tampa, appropriated $1 million from city budget, and then to be appropriated $1 million from CRA for that. So I don't think the issue are the needs of East Tampa or North Tampa or East or South Tampa or North Tampa, et cetera. The issue is how are we going to pay for it? That's what I really, public safety is number one, but mathematics and getting to those dollars that pay for public safety is very important. So it's one thing to propose an idea, it's another thing to talk about how to pay for it. When it comes to paying for anything, just flippantly out of the reserve. Perfect example. Early on in this budget process, there were numerous requests that I made. One of them was for an autism sensory-friendly park that was going to cost several $1 million. Something that if you're raising a child with special needs, it's a need. It's a real need. That was something that wasn't in this budget as proposed by the administration. We'll look forward to engaging on that next year, but I'm not going to push that forward this year and go, hey, listen, let's just take it out of the reserves, et cetera. We're going to find a way in the future how to take care of that, but if I were to, I'd want to have mathematics that adds up on that proposal, and that's all I'm looking for here tonight, is for fiscal responsibilities to come to that. What I would suggest is that we take, and if council is so amenable, a 10-minute break for city council, 5 or 10-minute break. It's been about 2 hours, and so folks can talk separately and engage. Councilman.
Can I just clarifying question? Chief LaCicero, I think when we met, you said that the to have a full-time service is $1.2 million or something like that. How much is it?
The chief, the budget officer clarified that for us.
Yes, it's $1.1 million in operating expenses that would be originate from the general fund.
Is that in addition to what's being proposed for the part-time or the peak one?
It is separate and apart. If I may, let me back up for just a second. The peak scenario, wherein we provide about $400,000 in compensation and benefits and $200,000 as an asset, still maintains the balanced general fund budget that you've been presented with while pulling additional resources from the community investment tax. The full-time scenario would imbalance the general fund budget that you've been presented while taking, again, from the community investment tax for the asset, for the rescue vehicle. So the peak unit can be contained within the budget that's been presented. The full-time cannot.
I would just say, as I stated before, I think we need these services, but what are we going to cut? I think we need to figure out what are we going to cut, because I'm not willing to vote for something that reduces the general fund reserve. Mr. Vieira talked about what he asked for. I asked for nothing except for the mayor to put in the general fund reserve. And if we don't at least do that, I think we're being fiscally reckless again. And what we need to do is look systemically at these services throughout the city. There's money that I believe was wasted in purchasing and things like $12 million boathouses. I mean, just stupid things that money was spent on. The new administration is going through, looking at all these line items, looking at all the budgets. We're more carefully looking at it. I think we all partly inherited this budget. We've all committed, as Mr. Vieira said, to support East Tampa. I asked for nothing so that we could focus more energy on East Tampa. We've put $1 million, and we're proposing to put another $1 million. I'm committed to focusing a lot of energy. It's not my district, but I'm interested in focusing a lot of efforts in that area. But the only thing I ask is let's not erode our general fund reserve, because we desperately need that. If we get it to 2 years from now and we're cutting basic services, if we're cutting back even from where we are now in these basic services, we're going to hear 300 people complaining in this audience. And so we need to be fiscally responsible. So what is it that we want to cut?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may also offer a clarification, just so there's been absolutely no misunderstanding. I live and breathe this stuff, and I don't want to take it for granted that everybody else does too. The East Tampa Cultural Center does not impact the balanced budget that you've been presented either. Both those funding sources are non-general fund, the community investment tax and the potential funding source from the CRA.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco. Then we'll take a break. Go ahead, sir.
Just some general comments. I've been quiet, for the last few hours. But first, Mr. Bennett, you've been wonderful in communicating. You're accessible. You answer right away. You call back right away. Same goes for Mayor Castor. I said before we began this meeting tonight, because I spoke with her today. I said Bob Buckman was very nice with me. No, he was a very kind man in that regard. But Castor's on top of things nonstop, always communicating, always asking what I think, how I feel, any other ideas. I mean, she's very much engaged, and I appreciate that. Looking at this budget, my biggest thing was the swimming pools, and the price tag for one came in at almost $4 million for a brand new ADA compliant facility, state of the art, new, done the right way. In the budget, they put $100,000 to study, not just the Seminole Heights pool, but the one in West Tampa. So it's a start. We have the conversation going so we can make sure we look at all sources of funding to get that done. And I appreciate that. I asked for some roads to be repaved, specifically in West Tampa. Again, the administration responded. They helped prioritize some of those roads that are very badly needed. One lady that lives on the corner of one of those streets, 92 years old, said, "Before I die, I'd like my road paved." Sounds ridiculous, but it's a road paving, and you delivered. East Tampa and this community center, multicultural center, I've heard the Jazzy seniors come year after year asking. And, the action was taken this year with the leadership of Councilman Goods and the support of this council at we have $1 million tonight, and then, we assume the CRA another $1 million. That's a huge win. Again, you responded. We're talking about the rescue vehicle. It may not be perfect, but again, you responded, you're here, you've answered the questions, and I hope that we can come to a consensus on that. But you've gone above and beyond. It's not that we've been ignored. I certainly haven't felt ignored, and things are getting done. Not everything I wanted, not the $4 million pool, whatever. I have to be reasonable, but you're doing the best that you can, and I think we're being fiscally responsible, looking at, especially, $1 million. We made the motion and it was supported. That's a huge investment. So I'm happy to support this budget. I'll see what happens after this break. But you guys are going above and beyond. I don't know what else to say. So that's it. Thank you,
Mr. Shelby.
Yes, and council, just before you take your recess, I know council knows this, but I'm also saying this for the benefit of the public. This recess is for you to discuss individually that the Sunshine Law does apply. This is a public meeting. Anything that you discuss cannot be with other council members or in the presence of other council members related to city business. I know council knows that. I'm asking for the public to be aware of that as well.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate. We'll recess. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. We have a motion by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.